Okay, so welcome everybody. Today's class is going to be on the ninth Sepher Yesod, which is also called the Temple of Yesod, and it is, of course, the foundation of the Tree of Life. So today I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of notes that I've taken over the years in my big amethyst covered notebook called the Concourse of Forces. Basically, it's notes from all different sources that I've collected over the years. Whenever I find a source of information that I particularly enjoy or think has some really choice insights, I note it down in the Concourse of Forces so that I can retrieve that information quite easily without having to rummage through a whole bunch of occult books, which is, you can imagine, after a while, you accumulate quite a bit. And each one will have a lot of repetition, but it will have a few choice gems that you really want to hold on to. A lot of today's notes are coming from Dion Fortune's Mystical Kabbalah, and also Gareth Knight's Practical Guide to Qabalistic Symbolism, which is a book that's about 2 inches thick, but it's a very good one. And of course, Chicken Kabbalah, which is an excellent beginner's entryway into the whole idea of Kabbalah. So here's the first page of my Concourse of Forces, where I copied down the Tree of Life and wrote in the attributions and the major arcana that go along with the tree. And so today we're going to be thinking about the Sephiroth down here at the bottom, Yesod. We previously did the Temple of Malkuth here at the bottom, and then we traveled up the Universe card when we did our path working. And so next ahead of us is Yesod, right here, the foundation. And as you can see, it's situated near the bottom of the tree, but not in the material world. So I think it'd be a good time to talk about why it is that we study Kabbalah. Because it is quite complicated and there's a lot of information. And sometimes it can be kind of confusing. It's like, what is this all for? Well, the reason we study Kabbalah is that it gives us a model of the universe and a model of consciousness, as the two things are, by this point of view, considered to be the same. We can only experience and encounter what's in the universe as the same as what's inside of ourselves. The aspects of ourselves that we're aware of, we can see in the universe, and that's how we experience it. Having this particular model, and there are others, and it's a good idea to have more than one model of the universe, gives us a way to explore consciousness, to explore the universe itself, and to manipulate imageries and ideas and things. As you will see when we talk about the Tarot, because the Tarot, of course, gets all of its meaning from this diagram. So the Sepher Yesod, placed at this point near the bottom of the tree with these paths projecting into it from above, basically acts as a mirror or a lens that focuses all the energies of the tree from above and projects it into the universe itself, and provides basically a framework for the universe itself to manifest. So why don't we move on and look at some of the attributions that are in Dion Fortune's wonderful book, Mystical Kabbalah. So you can see right away.
Can you close this? Let me touch something. You do know that it's recorded.
What? Okay. Okay. Up here, we can see the title of Yesod is the foundation. And the Hebrew spelling gives us Yod, Samak, Vav, and Daleth, which you can explore since every single Hebrew letter has its own meaning. So we have hand for Yod, Samak is a prop or a support, Vav is a nail or attachment point, and Daleth is, of course, a mark, cross, or a vow or affirmation. So since the Hebrew letters themselves have their own meaning, you can explore the names of things and come up with your own ideas about what it all means. The magical image, a beautiful naked man, very strong. You'll see the idea of strength, of foundation, of power, repeatedly in the images and thoughts of Yesod, because it forms the foundation of the physical universe. So there's a great emphasis on strength and power. Here it is masculine, even though it's on the middle of the tree. You would think it would be something a little more androgynous, but we have a beautiful naked man here, and then Malkuth, the kingdom, is a beautiful woman. So there's a polarity there that's being suggested, which is something, it's older ideas. I mean, we may have more sophisticated ways of thinking about things now, but I think at the time, there's an idea that a huge amount of energy is sort of projected from Yesod down into Malkuth, sort of like, the way I envision it is in like a movie theater. The screen itself is the material world where we see the images play. And Yesod is the projection room up behind us that uses a great deal of electricity and power and projects the images down onto the screen, sort of like Plato's cave. So I think there's an idea in Kabbalah, masculine things are usually things that project energy, and feminine things are things that use and contain and make energy useful. So the next we have the Yetzirah text. There's a very seminal book called the Sepher Yetzirah, which is the book of the world of formation. It's pretty old. I think most people think it's about 300 BC or AD, I think. And it goes through and forms a lot of the basic ideas about Kabbalah that come now down to us. It gives us story and history of all the different letters and a lot of other information. And here the Yetzirah text says the ninth path is called the pure intelligence because it purifies the emanations, it proves and corrects the designing of the representations, and disposes the unity with which they are designed without demutation or division. Okay, so what does that mean? It's basically kind of repeating the same idea I was kind of introducing earlier, that it represents sort of the lens, or the focusing apparatus that projects the energies from all above the higher levels of the tree down into manifestation. It corrects, it cleans up the images, it focuses them, but it doesn't diminish them. In the same way that a really good mirror or lens would be able to concentrate light and you'd be able to see distant galaxies, or you'd be able to take a really good picture, or you'd be able to project an image on a screen that people could enjoy a good drama, which is what this world is. It's that idea repeated over and over again. Why don't I skip down and let's talk about the vision of the machinery of the universe, because I think that ties in really well. the spiritual experience, the vision of the machinery of the universe. There's an old woodblock print, sort of Middle Ages looking thing, where there's a guy and he's looking through the edge of the world, looking through the edge of the sky, and behind it he can see all the cogs and gears moving, the planets and stars and everything around. That is the spiritual experience, and again it ties into the idea of the projection room. That's something they come back to understanding how the universe works behind the scenes, because of course Yetzirah is the astral temple. When we do our magical workings, they take place in the Yetzirah astral world in Yesod. When we do the Temple of Limitless Light, there's the story where we're in the garden or in the safe place, we venture out into the more wild parts, and eventually we pass through the obsidian mirror, through absorbing our reflection. And then we're in the sacred space. We're in the astral world. When we talked about astral projection, we had that class a while back. We discussed this whole idea again, that when we do basic astral projection and we're looking around our living rooms and perhaps traveling to places that we enjoy or visiting loved ones, we're doing etheric work. As the astral world, it's a little bit higher, more refined, and it's also called the treasure house of images, because it is in the Yetzirah and Yesod that all the images and symbols and ideas of our universe are stored, much like the slides in a projector or the frames on a film, that energy is used and projected down to create our universe. So that's that idea that's repeated through metaphor and sort of flowery images, that it can be somewhat confusing at first. But after a while, they start to sort of coalesce, and you start to see that it is the world behind this one. And that's the world that we go to when we work magic. We are in the Yesodic realm. We are in the astral temple. Because if you can imagine, its energy is flowing down the tree into creation, evolving, and then moving back up. We want to impress our magical will on the higher planes. We want to go up to the projection room and modify the film so that we can modify the projection on the screen in the material world. And that's basically the idea behind this form of magic, is that you travel to the higher realms and press your will, and then it flows down into creation. And then the how, there's many hows. But that's basically the idea. So the next thing that we should talk about is that we have 4 ideas. We have a God name, an archangel, an order of angels, and a mundane chakra or planet. What these 4 ideas, these 4 archetypes, these 4 names are getting at is that in Kabbalah, there are 4 worlds. And of course, 4, we go back to the 4 elements. So the God name corresponds to the plane of fire, absolute. The archangel corresponds to the Briatic world, or water. The order of angels corresponds to the Yetzirah world, or air. And the mundane chakra, or planet, is the influence that exists in the microcosm, in our universe, or Zaya. And so that's the same idea that we've seen repeated. So the God name would be wands in the tarot. The archangel would correspond to cups. The order of angels would be air, so it would be swords. And the mundane chakra or planet would be corresponding to the pentacles. So let's explore these ideas a little bit. So the flow of energy is also from fire down to earth into manifestation. The God name represents the inspiration or the will. Shaddai El Hai, the mighty, almighty living God, is also a God of fertility and life force. It represents God, the life giver, God, the great, strong, mighty God of life. So we go back to the idea of Yesod, represents this powerful energy that flows, energy and life force down into the material world. The Archangel, Gabriel, is also strongly associated with fertility and with life bringing. The angel of the Annunciation announced to Mary that she was pregnant with Jesus. Gabriel variously carries a number of symbols that have yin yang, masculine, feminine properties, like a horn has a masculine and a feminine part, you know, a pointy part, an open part, a cup. Those are symbols that go really well with Gabriel. Also a divine messenger. There's a lot of fertility. So if the God name Shaddai El Hai, that aspect of the deity is producing life force. It's a very simple energy, but very powerful. It flows down to Gabriel, and Gabriel being more complicated. As we go from the source to manifestations, things go from simple to complex. Gabriel is taking that energy and coming up with a plan of how it's going to be manifested in the material world. I have a little description from Gareth Knight's Practical Guide to Qabalistic Symbolism of Gabriel that I thought I'd share with you, particularly because I've always found this one to be quite imaginative and useful. Gareth Knight is a really good writer, highly respected. So here's the description. Archangel, let's see. Archangel of the Annunciation, Gabriel, who gives us the power of vision. He can be imagined, but you can imagine any gender you wish. It's an old book, so it's going to be he. He can be imagined as a beautiful blue-green figure with flashes of light and a tremendous swirl of colors of various shades of peacock tints, shot with silver, which are his wings or a part of his extensive aura. And about his head and beneath his feet, streams of liquid silver. It may be noted that these are not, strictly speaking, the Sephirotic colors, but one should not let the imagination be bound too closely by tradition, particularly with symbols like the flashing colors, which are to a large extent arbitrary. The colors given above in connection with the Archangel Gabriel should evoke as much of the sea and the moon power, which is an integral part of the Sepher Yetzirah. And it goes on for a couple more pages because it's a big book. But I love that idea. And I like to imagine Gabriel with peacock feathered wings. I think that's really wonderful. And of course, it brings up the idea of the ocean, the sea, as very Yesodic, because all life, of course, on Earth came from the ocean and the vast depths of the ocean and the reflection. If you ever go to the ocean at night and see the moon reflected in the water, those are symbols that are very representative of the idea of Yesod. Okay, so the next is the order of angels, the cherubim. It's here spelled cherubim, strong. It's a translation. Oh yeah, and of course Gabriel means strength of God. The L part is of God, so Gabriel is strength, so strength of God. And the order of angels are the cherubim, again, the strong. So things can become more complicated as we venture from world to world. Here we're in the realm of the intellect. So these are the angels or divine forces or patterns and powers of the universe, however you want to look at it, that take the inspiration, the plan, and start to implement things. They are working just behind the scenes of the material world to create. Now, the cherubim can be imagined as sphinxes. Now, the idea of a sphinx has a lot of history and a lot of mystical symbolism. If you look on some of the major arcana cards, and particularly the world card, you'll see the four animals or creatures of the apocalypse, but they're also animals of the four elements. So in tradition, you have the elemental beings. You have a lion representing the element of fire, because these are going with the fixed signs of the zodiac. That's where these come from, these images. A bull for Taurus, an eagle for water, because eagle is one of the symbols of Scorpio, and a person, a human being, for fire. So you can imagine these sphinxes being combinations of these four animals, these four creatures. Like in ancient Egypt, you had body of a lion, head of a man. There are also in Assyria, there are combinations where you'd have the legs of an eagle, the body of a bull, the head of a man, and the tail of a lion. Now, it's not meant to be taken quite too literally, like this is something that you should like super memorize and focus on, but it's the idea of sort of breaking down our imaginations and allowing us to see how these elements are combining and what the elements themselves mean. So the cherubim are these angels that are manipulating the four elements and combining them behind the scenes to create the material world itself. That's the idea. And they, they can be invoked using Kabbalistic magic to influence how things are manifesting in the physical world. And then the mundane chakra, which we'll probably talk a lot more about, of course, is the moon, which we can also say it's a planet, a planetary archetype. So the moon itself is a perfect representation of the idea of the Yesod, the Yesodic temple, since it reflects the light of the sun, reflecting the solar light. It has no light of its own, but it directs the energy of the sun down to the earth. And we can all look at the moon, but it's very dangerous to look directly at the sun. The moon also has all sorts of influences on the earth, setting up circadian rhythms and patterns of tide. Animals use the moon for navigation and to learn when to molt and travel and different things. Lunar calendars were the first calendars that were available to human beings because it was something that could be watched. You could like mark how many moons something happened. So we get the idea of taking energy from the source, the sun, and projecting it down into the world, and also the idea of setting up rhythms and patterns. So the moon represents the hidden forces of Yesod in our everyday lives. Then we have a few more attributions from Divine Fortune, Virtue, Independence, Vice, Idleness. Correspondence on the microcosm, reproductive organs. So where this comes from is if you imagine the tree of life projected over your body as though you were standing in the tree. Yesod would be in your crotch, in the reproductive organs. And again, the idea of creation of life, right? Because we're getting this tremendous energy that we're using to create another person is very symbolic of the idea of Yesod, because we go back again and again to the idea of fertility and creativity and directing and shaping energy, which is the reproductive act, allowing somebody to come into manifestation, to have an existence, to create life. The symbols, perfumes and sandals. Perfumes, because the sense of smell is one of the most primitive and goes directly to the brain. It was probably one of the first senses that evolved, and the sense of smell tied directly into the memory centers of the mind. And so that represents a direct connection to the subconscious. So that's why perfumes, like the incenses and some odors that you would use in a ritual, like you might want to burn frankincense for one ritual because it has certain effects and certain attributions, and sandalwood for another would be more grounding. That would tie directly to the subconscious. And the symbol of the sandals, which is repeated often, it's a little bit, it's a bit hard to understand, but some people say because it's direct connection to Sandalphon, which is the archangel for Malkuth, that it also sort of represents to me more the ability to travel throughout the planes, which we talked about when we did astral projection. So the idea of like sandals, like you have these special shoes, so now you can travel the inner worlds. I prefer that interpretation, but there can be others. Okay, so we've talked a bit about Yesod and gone through the various ideas of the imagery and the idea behind it, that we have these four worlds, which is something that we talk about a lot because it's kind of a crucial concept. The spiritual experience, the vision of the machinery of the universe. I think that should probably make a lot of sense by now. So why don't we move on and talk a little bit about the tarot. Okay, so here's a picture of one of my all-time favorite books, Qabalistic Tarot by Robert Wang. It's probably still in print. I can't imagine it going out of print. It's just an absolute encyclopedia of tarot information. And as we can see in this diagram, I don't want to overload you with too much information. I just wanted to more share this with you so you would get an idea of where these ideas come from and how the tarot gets its meaning. That, as we can see in the diagram, what it's trying to show is that there's not only a Kabbalistic correspondence to tarot cards, they also have an astrological correspondence. And these things together are what give a tarot card its meaning. So, and the next question is, why do we need all this? Why is this here? Well, the reason is that the tarot itself is also called the Book of Thoth. It is the book of all knowledge, and it acts as a grand unification theory for all of Western occult wisdom. So by studying the tarot, we connect both astrology and Kabbalah all together into sort of a unified field of thought. And by adding in astrology as well as Kabbalah to the tarot, we get the added dimension that we can think about things in terms of time. You know, if you have a lot of cards that have a particular time of year, that could mean something in a tarot reading. So let me just go over this diagram real briefly. So we can see that the aces and the princesses both represent a quarter of the year, a quarter of the calendar. So the princesses or pages are as important to the tarot as the aces. And then within that ring, we can see the court cards represent 30 degrees of the sky. And then the small cards represent 10 degrees. And so, for instance, if I look at the 9 of Pentacles here, you can see that it's an Earth card because it's in Virgo. And it represents the time of the year from September 2nd to September 11th. If we had all the attributions in here, you'd also see a Mercury, because it also is Mercury in Virgo. So all of this represents all the small cards of the tarot, divided up into the year with attributions for which sign, which element, and there's also a planetary correspondence, which we'll talk about next. Okay. So here's some images from my Concourse of Forces, my writing. So here we have first the 9 of Wands, Fire of Dreams, Lord of Great Strength. So we have the tremendous strength of Yesod. We have the fire because it's a wand, so it represents absolute, the fire world. So we have those two ideas, and the idea of dreaming because of the subconscious. And we also have the attribution of the moon in Sagittarius, which is a very good placement. So those 4 elements together give the card its divinatory meaning, the power of inspiration, ascendancy through the agency of the emotions and the imagination. Its power causes the reversal of all misfortune and sorrow through the application of positive thought. Idealistic, religious pursuits, and philosophic conjectures. Somewhat lacking in objectivity would be its downside. But again, you can see there's an idea of great strength, great power, regeneration, healing, and creativity. The 9 of Cups. Here we have Yesod in the world of Bria, the archangelic world. And we also have a Jupiter in Pisces, which is another rather good combination. So we have compassion and clarity, solid intuition, inner sight, inner understanding, kindness, realizations of one's heart's desire. This card is also known as the wish card, which is an energy that we've used in several rituals as a way to manifest our heart's desires. The wishing ritual and is a good example of the use of the 9 of Cups energy to manifest things. So now the dreaded 9 of Swords. So when this card comes up, everyone like groans because it isn't a very positive card. Now the energy, Yesod within the realm of Yetzirah, the creative world, the air world, can be very positive. And that's what's written here at the top. the powers of self-determination, which are represented as actualizing one's potential through the artifice of the imagination, thus inspiring one's boundless willpower. So the idea is determination. But the reason the tarot card is so nasty is because of the astrological combination, which is Mars and Gemini. So you have the single pointed focused nature of Mars within the sign of the twins, where it's completely restless and can never settle. So the divinatory meaning and a reading, combining that, astrological aspect too, then you get the sorrow of the card. Abuse, overcritical, restlessness, irritability, temperamental, anger. It's the image that we see of the woman laying in bed crying with the swords behind her. So we can see here how the astrological meaning can really change the meaning of the card in a divination. And of course, the Nine of Pentacles. So that would be Yesod in the world of Isaiah, the earth of dreams. Here the idea is pleasure. And the two meanings, both magical and the divination, are pretty similar. So manifestation of dreams and desires that may act out full realization. Another idea of the power to create desire, which causes dreams to become manifest and acted out. It's the power of pleasure and the associated feelings of fulfillment and satiety. In the divinatory, we have Lady of Material Gain, Yesod and Isaiah, another very good astrological combination, Mercury and Virgo, which I was pointing out on that wheel diagram before. So Mercury is very happy in the world of Virgos because it adds to, the whole idea of pragmatic idealism, application of ideologies, and appreciation of beauty in nature. But of course, it can be very fussy because that's the Virgo attribution. So we can look at some of the tarot decks. Up at the top here is my deck that I use in divination, a little dog-eared. So we have the Nine of Wands. You can see it's sort of representing a pause in the struggle, but there's great strength and healing that's taking place. Here, the first card, the Nine of Cups, which is the Wish card. The Nine of Swords, sorrow, where I was telling you how you had that Mars and Gemini, where there's restlessness and an inability to settle on any one thing because of the astrological combination. And of course, the Nine of Pentacles, where we're talking about the Mercury and Virgo, along with Yesod and Isaiah. It represents the idea of pleasure and practical application of knowledge to the simple life. And then, of course, Crowley's absolutely gorgeous deck. Symbolism, which is, of course, quite complex and well thought out, but you can see the similarities in the ideas of, the cups overflowing, the swords are, of course, rotting and dripping. And he puts on the astrological symbols too. You can see little symbols of Mars at the top. And the Pentacles has a lot of very deep, complex symbolism in them that represents sort of the pattern of the tree of life itself. We have strength, happiness, cruelty, and gain are some key words. Here are some additional interesting interpretive decks. It's the Voodoo Tarot at the top, representing these same ideas, and an herbalism deck. at the bottom with different herbs that represent the different ideas of the various cards. Here's another deck atop of the Osha, where we have sort of a Zen deck. Here they went with exhaustion, because the Nine of Wands does sort of represent a pause for healing. Laziness, okay, I mean, all right, because it's Zen, it's not going to be focused on material gain. Sorrow, the worry, ripeness. Ripeness is a good word for the Nine of Pentacles. And then at the bottom is a deck I recently bought. It's a David Bowie tarot deck that somebody created using a lot of symbols of, yeah, the Starman Tarot. So again, we have strength, happiness, cruelty, and gain, the different ideas. Okay, so I think this is a good place to stop. We go into the idea of the moon. And okay, so I think I can go back to the meeting.
Oh my God, what happened? Did you just end the meeting?
I don't know.
Okay, put your mouse down.